We just want them, to be saved and just to live a life that glorifies God.
What about you,
Paula? My expectations weren't so much for them as it was for God to just be faithful to me as a mom and to lead and guide me and direct me with each child individually, and not to lump them together, even though we call ourselves a unit. Each one of them is very individual.
Yeah.
And so my whole thrust was to really brainwash them Jesus, whatever that looked like. And I have been accused, and I do use that word, accused of brainwashing them. I'm like, absolutely, it's either me or you. So I choose me. Thank you very much. And so that's been our thrust, is to steer them towards him in how we act, how William and I treat each other, how we respond to them, when we see ourselves in them.
Yes.
And then we have to say, okay, God, like there's been so many times where I've been disciplining a child and I'll hear the Holy Spirit say, that's you. And then I have to back up and admit that to that child, like, this is me. I understand you see this in me. I know you do, and I apologize that you see this in me. I'm working on it. I need you to pray for me. I'm gonna pray for you, but you still have to obey me because I'm pointing them ultimately to a Savior. And so I feel like if they can see me apologize, and if they can see that I am not perfect, and they can come to me, and I've always had an open door with them. Come to me. Good, come correct. But you can always come to me and talk to me about anything. And I'm so thankful that on this side, most of our children are grown, that they've come back and they're like, thank you and Dad so much for, how you did this or how you did that or how you didn't allow us to do this or how you sacrificed on this end, and how, I'm like, we're hearing these words verbalized to us, and it has made the journey, in most cases, on most days, very worth it. There's some days where I'm like, what have we done? But overall, we can just see, that God has got them. And there are times where we see them going left and we're going, oh gosh, Lord, get them, Jesus, get them, Jesus. And then we have to pray. Do we say? Do we not say? And so again, going back to your question, our expectations are, God, lead me and guide me with each one individually, and it doesn't change just because they're adults. It does not change. That prayer is still the same.
That's good.
Yeah, and you spoke about not being perfect, and I think I'm talking about how we had expectations on our kids, but I think even the expectation on us as parents is that we've got to get everything right. How is that when you realize that, and I just haven't gotten things right? I don't know if you have any personal stories or anything that you can share that, man, I just realized that, hey, I'm gonna mess up, and I've got to be okay with that. I'm gonna have to learn and grow, and there has to be room for grace for myself, that I can't be so hard on myself. I don't know if you've had that.
I mean, I think that's daily. But I think that's daily, but I think even my labor was, I wanted this natural birth. I was going to do it with no medication. I went to 7 centimeters. And I was like, oh no, come on. We're gonna have to do this.
We're the drugs.
Right. Because, for me, giving birth, the status of perfection was I was going to have this water birth. It was going to be, I was going to have this spiritual experience with God, and I was going to do it with no medication. And while I did it for over 12 hours, baby's heart rate started dropping, so I had to get an epidural. And I remember crying. I was like, I got an epidural, I'm horrible, I'm a horrible mother, and people were looking at me like, girl, do you know how many people come here and get drugs every day?
Guilt number one. Number one, guilt. First guilt of motherhood right there.
So before he was even born, I had this expectation that, I was going to do everything by the book. Everything was going to be perfect. And that was what, to me, it was distorted, but to me, that was my idea of what my natural labor birth experience was. But I think that's daily. I think it's daily that I'm reminded that this is not perfect. Whether, he blow out his diapers or, we spill milk or whatever. Motherhood is not perfect. It can't be.
It's not perfect. And going back to the labor piece, I think that's pretty common. I felt the same way too. And I was 20 when I had my first, almost 21 when I had my first child. Actually, I was 21. 3 days later, 3 days before I turned 21. And because I was young, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a breeze.
Yeah.
I go in the hospital, and then I have to get the epidural. And 64 hours later, in a C-section, here she comes. You know, and ever since then, I've been an epidural poster child, though. So, like, I would go in, like, waiting for my epidural because I felt like there's no shame in this. There's no shame in this. And you don't know what you don't know, number one. And number two, there is one perfect parent, and we are not that. None of us. Jesus is the only perfect parent. So I think we have to really allow, you know, the grace piece. And I've asked my children, you know, to extend grace to me, you know, and have heard them say, like, with case in point, our last two children, we had 2 children in the 80s, 3 children in the 90s, 2 children in the 2000s. So our poor 2000s children, because we are now older, we are very, very middle-aged, they're not getting us like those older children got us. We don't have the juice anymore. We just don't have it. And so we've apologized to them, like, guys, we are so sorry. I know you came on the tail end of all those fun field trips we used to do and all the park runs and everything. And they're like, it's okay, Mom and Dad. We really understand that you guys are just old now. But you know, we have to understand that these are just our limits. That's what it is. We need them to. We'd like for them to extend grace. They don't have to. But we'd like for them to extend grace, and we make up for it in other ways. And they're just gonna be times where you can only do what you can do.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that labor piece, because as a man, like, I can't relate. Like, I was
you don't
there.
want to.
No joke. No joke.
Yeah, I was there with my wife, but it's just like you just see your spouse in just this way, and it's like you feel helpless. It's like nothing at all that I can do, and just that amount of pressure that is put on women, where it's just like you gotta have everything so natural and. You know, don't do no drugs, and it's just like just from, like you said, he wasn't even born yet, and I had this pressure as a mother, and just dealing with that. But I thought that was just a great segue, because when I was coming up with topics, I was like, hey, what are some good things that we can talk about? And you mentioned infertility, and it was just like something that, again, as a man, that I'm not even really cognizant of, but as I've been in church, I realized it's such a big thing.
Oh yeah,
you know, and how many women are struggling, or families, I should say, are struggling with that. And again, wanting to have real conversations, but just handle it with the sensitivity that it deserves, because we personally know people who have gone through these things. And so you have brought up the topic. I didn't know if you were speaking just from your own personal experience or speaking from people that you've known and how you've engaged, how you've ministered to individuals. If this, again, I don't know how you wanted to take that topic.
So I've experienced with both. So I've never had an infertility diagnosis, but certainly when my husband and I started trying to conceive, it took me over a year. And due to me, since high school, being on birth control, because I just had a lot of female, challenges, birth control, kind of, when you get off of it, a lot of, women are finding now that when you get off of it, it does kind of, mess with, your monthly, and just how your body works. So I went through a year of wondering, oh my God, what if I, never have children? And I also felt guilty, because when my husband and I got married, my husband, grew up with siblings, and I'm an only child. So growing up, I was like, oh no, if I'm gonna get married, I'm gonna, have a baby when I'm like 35. I'm not gonna, have a baby. And so I felt guilty, because I was like, oh Lord, now that, we finally decided to have a baby, now I can't get pregnant. So I did have that experience, and I had a lot of women walking with me through that. And, of course I prayed, and I said, Lord, if this is your will, I believe that motherhood is a ministry, just like marriage is. But then there was a transition when I found out I was pregnant, and I had friends who do have infertility diagnosis. So then I felt guilty.
Yes.
Because I was like, oh, here we were walking this thing out together.
Right.
Now I have to step back, you know, and, you know, women were honest with me. They said, Shanetta, I don't know how to support you because you're pregnant and I can't get pregnant. You know, it's been 5 years or 8 years or whatever. But I mean, even as a social worker professionally, I work with a lot of people who have infertility challenges. And I think that, especially in spaces of faith, it's a hard thing to discuss. It's a hard thing to talk about. But I think that I definitely wanted us to talk about it on this forum because it's something that in spaces of faith we don't discuss. We don't really talk about what it's like for women to be around, you know, even for our church, you know, we have women who have, like Paula, like 7 children. But what about the wives who do have empty arms on Mother's Day or, you know, just every day, and they desire that. So, yeah.
Yeah. I remember on Mother's Day at our church, my husband asked me to come up when he emceed to talk to the moms on Mother's Day. And I was like, okay, Lord, well, what do you want me to say? Because, you know, I personally know a couple of the women who are suffering with infertility, you know, and if you've ever been pregnant, you're a mom. If you've ever conceived, you're a mom. And so I wanted that to be made known, you know, to those moms who've dealt with that, because that's really, I've never personally dealt with that, but my heart does go out. I'm empathetic. I will never say, oh, I understand what you're going through.
Right.
I don't. Right. I don't understand.
Right.
But I feel like I know how to pray.
Yeah.
I know how to pray, and I know how to follow up, and I know how to, you know, to love on people. So if I can do that from that perspective, then that's kind of where, you know, I kind of tuck that in. But it might not be a bad idea if you have some women on here who speak
absolutely
to that, because I'd love to hear about that.
And I think for me, you know, I went through months where I took multiple pregnancy tests. And no one can ever describe the feeling of sitting on the toilet in a bathroom and saying, oh, it's negative, you know? And it's just, it's heartbreaking, you know, to wonder or to ever think. And I experienced that for over a year. So I can just imagine women and wives who experience that for longer. I just can't fathom that. So, yeah.
And then alongside that, because along with infertility, there, you know, miscarriage is another piece that I think, you know, could be implemented as well, because I think it's one thing to have never been pregnant, but I think it's also another thing to have miscarried, and I have had that experience. And this is very interesting. I feel like I'm an anomaly in so many areas of my life, and this is another one. My very last child, I was pregnant, and my whole family was like, you're having twins this time, you're having twins. And I'm like, come on, y'all, we're not having twins. And then I wake up one morning in a pool of blood, and I stand up, and the baby drops out. And so we go into the OB, they put me on the monitor, and they say, here's where baby A was, and here's baby B. And I said, what? They said, oh, you didn't know you were having twins? What? Like, what? And I didn't know. And so because I couldn't have a D&C where they go in and scrape the uterus, that means I now have to carry this baby, and so I bleed for the whole 9 months, and then I go on bed rest for the rest of the 9 months, you know, because we don't know, you know, if this baby's even gonna hold. So I'm going through a whole pregnancy wondering, am I gonna lose this one too? And so there's that dichotomy of, I lost a baby, but I'm still pregnant. Like, how do you reason with that in yourself? That was really hard emotionally, and that was the first time I dealt with depression. Also, because you got this huge hormonal, you know, depletion, but you still have those other crazy pregnancy hormones going on at the same time, and you're on bed rest, and the child that I just had was still a baby. I couldn't even lift her. I had to have people pick her up and put her on my lap so I could love on her. So it's a really hard season. So,
and I think the other thing, you know, too, with not knowing, even going back to infertility, is I felt like I disappointed my husband. You know, I was like, my husband's gonna leave me, you know, because I can't have a baby.
That's real.
You know, and I said, you know, I knew that was something that we both desired, but that was something that I wanted to give to my husband, you know, and I said, what if I can't have kids? You know, will he still love me the same? You know, will he still, and not to mention, you know, just being transparent, when you're dealing with infertility or when you don't know if you can have a child, you know, sex and intimacy becomes a task.
Yes.
You know, if we're just keeping it real, you know, we
That's
married.
Yes. Yes.
We married.
That's good. Yes.
It becomes a task, and it's like, oh, I'm ovulating. Come on, let's get it.
Let's get
you know?
it. That's right. Yep.
So I think that's another piece, the strain that it puts on a marriage.
Yes.
And while, you know, I love my son, and while Paula, I'm sure you can, you know, agree with me with your kids, but my marriage is first.
Correct.
You know, at the end of the day,
Correct.
you know, and if we're not healthy and if we're not in a good space, everything else is just put to shambles.
That's good. That's good.
And again, I'm glad y'all are here because, again, from a male's perspective, I'm completely oblivious to all these things. And I think the conversations like this need to happen. And how I always kind of view things, because like I said, I can't relate. I can't even imagine to understand what you guys go through and other women go through with that. I think like apologetically, where I can see where so many people would be angry at God.
Yeah.
You know, they would see so many people. I remember hearing one time where I think it was a pastor, a preacher, he was just talking about how this woman, she was just so upset that she couldn't have a child, but she would see people in the world who, I guess just to be blunt, felt like they didn't deserve a kid.
Yeah.
And she's here like, I know I would love this kid.
Yeah.
I know I would raise them knowing God. I know these things, but why are you not blessing me with the child, but you're blessing this pagan person who can care less about you with multiple children, and they don't even care about their kids. So I don't know if there's anything that you guys can speak to of being angry at God.
Yeah. I was never necessarily angry. I think mine was just more so of asking God if it was if it was his will, you know, just like single people, you know, when you're single, you know, some go through a phase of, you know, God, this is my desire. Is this your will? Is marriage a ministry for me? Is this something that you want to walk out? So for me, it was the same thing. It was, okay, I'm married, but maybe I'm not supposed to be a mother. You know what I mean? Then there's this IVF conversation, right? That's a whole nother conversation.
Yes.
You know, where, you know,
that's hardcore.
Yes, it is.
And what is IVF for those?
Help me.
In vitro fertilization.
Yes.
Okay, in vitro.
Yes.
And it's costly.
Yes.
It's very costly. And there's no guarantee. And I've seen so many people go through IVF, you know, more than once, you know, to have those eggs harvested and then, you know, they implant them and you hope that they take and then they don't take and then you go through it's a death.
Yeah.
It's literally a death that happens. And so the parents grieve for a child. And I know what it's like to grieve for a child you never even met. You know, so there's that piece. And then you want, you know, do we do this? Do we have enough money to do this again?
Yeah.
Do we have the fortitude to go through this again, not knowing, you know, what I cannot imagine, you know, walking in those shoes. I cannot imagine walking in those shoes.
Yeah.
It again, still can't imagine just to be in that position, and like I said, these are difficult conversations and difficult topics to have, and even talking, because I think I have heard of in vitro. Is it the embryo that they have, or
I think, don't quote me, but I think it's where they harvest the eggs and then they like mix the egg with the sperm in a petri
so it becomes an embryo, essentially.
Exactly. And then you're hoping that fertilized egg will implant.
Yes.
You know, and for whatever reason, because it's hostile up in there.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole trek is just a hostile environment. So the fact that a sperm and an egg actually make it and survive is nothing short of a miracle.
Yeah.
Like there are all kinds of acids that should kill it off. Like do kill off most of the sperm. So the one sperm that makes it, like he's a G.
Yeah.
I mean, like, Just straight up.
Yes.
It's the way that works.
So Lee, you got a couple G's over there, don't you? For those who hear Lee behind the camera.
Lee, you empowered.
But yeah, again, just wanting to have real and open and honest conversations. And like I said, just talking about in vitro, it led me to this topic of wanting to address and I don't like necessarily doing current events, but in those who are paying attention to the climate of things, I know Alabama has done away with abortions, even if it's in case of incest or rape, and so many people have been up in arms. And even when we're having this conversation about abortion, there's so many misconceptions, so many voices that are not heard, so many, those who are on the pro-life, it's always like assumed that just white evangelical Republicans who have the last say, and so just the optics of it just look really bad, of these white men trying to tell me what to do with my body, and other voices aren't heard. And then there's misconceptions about those women who have abortions don't want to be mothers, so they're kind of like looked down upon, and not realizing that, hey, they're in a difficult situation. And again, speaking as a man, I can't imagine a woman being in that situation. And also at the same time, and I don't necessarily want to speak out of turn, but I do feel like those men who, impregnate these women, where are they? A lot of times we hear the story is, here's $300. Where's the responsibility that's being taken when you do what you do and you understand the consequences, and then you're going and you leave this woman to fend for herself, and then we're upset that she makes a decision that I guess most, and again, it's not that it's always people who are religious who have a pro-life stance, but then we're looking down upon this woman who's forced in a very tough position to make a decision for herself. And we hear this other common notion is like, you only care about the child in the womb, you don't care about the child outside of the womb, and all these things that go on. And so I wanted to have this opportunity that I've got individual, and we all have the same worldview. And I also wanted to say this too, just to put my cards on the table. I'm not a big fan of politics, but I did go to a very conservative school. Most of you may know a little bit about Liberty University. And just when you say that, for people who are aware, that connotation of just being very conservative, very Republican. And I was at school around the time Obama was getting elected, so 2008. And so what I was learning from that worldview is they really pretty much focused on two issues, traditional marriage and pro-life. And even though you can make the biblical argument for both of those things, those were like the two main issues, and everything else was like secondary. And so for me, like, it was kind of like, man, if you had this was anything other than pro-life, it's like, how can you vote for X, Y, and Z? And as I've grown and mature, I realized that there's other issues, that it's not just as black and white as we think it is, that there's some gray. And again, just wanting to provide opportunity, platform to people share their thoughts, because I don't know where you guys stand on the issue, and realize that there's nuance within people who are Christians who have this worldview, and that we can't just polarize each other and just get mad at someone and just say, you're just trying to deny a woman's rights, or know, or even the reverse. So it just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to speak and share your thoughts and opinions on the matter.
So abortion is something that I'm very familiar with. I personally have never had an abortion, but I've been practicing social work for 6 years, and I've had multiple clients all the way to age 10 who have had abortions, had family members who had abortions. So my experience with it, I think that there are multiple different scenarios that go into play. Me personally, I do believe that life begins at conception.
Yo, my world don't stop when the beats commence. Said I'm climbing up this ladder just to get over this fence and run far, far away from the games people play. In this melancholy modern day music, Malay, touche. Pussycats with lives to spare that kick in your heart, nice as hell. Yeah, be aware, beware. I hate to see you less a liver or worse. Polar bear with the time catch the river. Now that's cold, and like that, now that's old. Didn't buy the last copy of this.